Hello everybody, my name is Volkans. In my last video I mentioned the class the amplifier that I'm building. It will be a 4-channel amp. In this video I will not talk about the amplifier yet. I will talk about why it will be a 4-channel amp instead of a simple 2-channel stereo amplifier. More than 20 years ago I read an excellent article by Rod Elliott from Australia about Biamping. I was immediately infected with the idea and haven't been cured since then. In fact, this will be my 5th DIY Biamped system, so it's fair to say I got a bit stuck with the idea. And as you have probably guessed, this Biamping thing is the reason why I will have twice as many amplifier channels in one box than normal people do. I will not go into a lot of detail in this video. If you are interested, I strongly recommend to read the mentioned article. I will give you just a short overview, then focus on the construction and how it works. So first of all, a simple question. Why do most loudspeaker boxes have multiple loudspeakers with different sizes? There are several reasons actually, but the most important one is this. A loudspeaker is usually not capable of producing all sound frequencies in the same quality and volume. A large loudspeaker would struggle when emitting a high-pitched tone, and a small loudspeaker would only whisper when emitting a low bass. Or worse, the high-amplitude sound would simply destroy it. So the idea is to distribute the sound between the loudspeakers, which means splitting the signal into low and high-frequency parts. Of course, we can split the sound even further. A lot of systems, especially in cars, have a subwoofer dedicated to reproducing very low frequencies at high volume. But for now, let's stick with low and high frequency ranges. The first question that occurs is, what do low and high really mean in this context?
First of all, human sound frequency perception is logarithmic. This means it is the ratio of two frequencies that defines how they relate to each other, not their absolute difference in hertz.
A ratio of 1 to 2 in frequencies is an octave. Humans can hear sounds from roughly 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz, which corresponds to about 10 octaves.
A common 16 cm woofer plus tweeter combination splits the sound at about 3 kHz, mainly due to the limitations of the tweeter.
But how can sound be split into different frequency ranges? What we need here is a combination of filters, a so-called crossover.
A simple analogy for an audio filter is a color filter. If you use a red filter, it will let red light pass, but filter out other colors. How strong the filtering is depends on the frequency difference, which in this case corresponds to difference in color. A filter is never razor sharp. If you want an audio filter to cut from say 100 Hz down, then it will let range below 100 Hz pass and at the same time attenuate range above 100 Hz. There are different filters with different selectivity. The unit is the so-called order. A first order filter has a 6 dB per octave slope, which translates to attenuating to half of the amplitude over 1 octave, to 1/4 over 2 octaves, etc. An everyday configuration performs this filtering inside the loudspeaker box. The crossover in this case is built up from coils, capacitors and resistors. These are so-called passive crossovers. If you want higher order filters to separate frequencies better, the number of required components increases accordingly.
And this is just one problem. Complex passive crossovers have other disadvantages. They eat up some of the power, weaken the amplifier's control over the loudspeakers, and cause unwanted and frequency-dependent delays in the sound. Needless to say, this doesn't mean that high-quality passive crossovers wouldn't exist. They do, but come at a price. You would be surprised how large portion of a loudspeaker box's material cost is spent on crossover components.
And here comes Biamping. What speaks against splitting the sound using active filters instead of passive ones? Well, a few things do. You need to multiply amplifier channels and run 2 cables to each of your loudspeakers. Other than that, not much. Efficiency is better, you have far more precise control over filtering characteristics, and you need less amplifier power. Yes, that's correct. If you replace a 100 Watt per channel stereo amplifier with a 25 Watt per channel 4-channel amplifier, you will still get the same volume. With one precondition: you must split the sound at 50% power content. This is around 350 Hz. Imagine you have two sine waves, one with 150 Hz and another with 600 Hz frequency, each of them with an amplitude of 1. The sum of these waves will vary between -2 and +2.
If you want to split this signal only in the loudspeaker box, you need an amplifier that can output an amplitude of 2. If you separate the waves before the amplifiers, you need two amplifiers that can output an amplitude of 1 each. And power is proportional to the square of amplitude. Reduce the amplitude to half and you only need a quarter in power. This is of course a simplified view, but it explains the idea. And there are further advantages to a Biamped configuration.
The biggest one is that it is much easier and cheaper to build higher order active filters than passive filters of the same order. In my case, it is a fourth order Linkwitz-Riley crossover that Elliot also suggests. Let me demonstrate the operation using the previously mentioned 150 Hz plus 600 Hz pair. These frequencies are only 1 octave away from the crossover frequency. The waveforms look distorted, but that's okay. If we check the sum of the two signals, it matches the original waveform. Let's set the frequencies to 75 and 1200 Hz. Now we are 2 octaves away from the crossover frequency. At this point, we have over 40 dB attenuation, which means each signal is a more than 99% accurate sine wave. We have split the signal into its components. To test the filtering characteristics, we set the test signal to a sweep. Since the crossover frequency is about 300 Hz, it is enough to test the 20 Hz to 2000 Hz range. The frequency spectrum display must be set to maximum hold, so that the entire characteristics can be recorded. The result is completely fine. Although I mentioned 350 Hz earlier, my actual crossover frequency is about 310 Hz.
Some of you may wonder now how I plan to use a tweeter from 300 Hz up. Point is, it will not be a tweeter. I will use a small full-range loudspeaker from ScanSpeak for the higher frequency part. And this brings up a very important detail when designing a Biamped system. You need to adjust your active crossovers to the loudspeakers that you use. It's no big surprise, passive crossovers are also designed to match the loudspeakers perfectly. Now that we have covered the basics of Biamping theory, let's take a look at the implementation. There are a few more interesting details.
The modules in lighter color were purchased from eBay. The darker color modules are the results of my own work. A preamplifier is necessary because the Class D amplifier module will expect a higher level input signal. This will be discussed in my next video about the amplifier itself.
The volume control is a bunch of relays switching resistors in a network. It is a passive control that can only attenuate the signal.
Placing the preamplifier after the volume control would mean amplifying an already attenuated signal, which is a far worse solution from noise and distortion point of view than amplifying the signal first and attenuating it after. The spectrum analyzer is based on a pair of MSG EQ7 ICs. I built the circuit years ago. Now I just adapted the firmware to use 8x8 LED matrix displays with MAX7219 drivers. The LED volume indicator is a WS2812 ring with 24 LEDs. It is driven by a microchip PIC microcontroller that reads the volume control relay signals and calculates how many LEDs to light up in the ring. As you can see, I have 3 power supply modules in the box, the one that came with the main controller, one to drive the crossover and the preamplifier, and one for the spectrum analyzer and the LED ring.
So the active crossover part is done and it's finally time to finish the actual amplifier. I really want to get it done soon, so the next video will hopefully come out in a couple of weeks. Until then, happy crafting and see you next time!